Gexing. I'm practicing immortality in Qingcheng Mountain. Introduction. Zhuang Zhou dreams of butterflies and asks Yu Xin.A. A young Taoist on Qingcheng Mountain looked at a sword named Peach Blossom in his hand, and he was full of thoughts. After years of farewell, he loved to eat peaches. He still loved to eat peaches, but there was a name on his mouth, which was a woman's name. That year, the dragon and snake started to land. He picked up a baby at the foot of Qingcheng Mountain. That year, the baby learned to speak and told his master that he would become the #1 in the world and help him find a wife. That year, there was an anomaly in the sky. Snowflakes fell on Xiaolianhua Peak, and a young man sat on the top of the mountain, drawing a diagonal line on the ground, causing the world to lose color. That year, a young man named Li Fansong mocked his senior brother for not practicing swordsmanship but always talking big. That year, at the peak of the Snow Moon City, a young man murmured softly, "It seems that the Xiaoyao Heavenly Realm is still unbeatable." Then, let's immerse ourselves in the divine realm. Sword. Chapter 1. The first in the world. Qingcheng Mountain Upper Path Boy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Senior brother. The second best in the world is coming to challenge you, the first in the world. On Qingcheng Mountain, a small Taoist boy in a bun, holding a wooden sword that was felt to be like wrapping pulp, crept up behind a little boy who was also a Taoist boy. Pinching her waist, she said with a full expression. "Fansong, have you finished reading the Sutra of Sumru?" Master said, "I don't need to look at that thing. I just need to practice swordsmanship well. The unscrupulous sword. It's infinite. Infinite sword. You bastard. Are you not afraid that the master will beat you up? It's still limitless, first, a punch of Wang Ba Quan, and then a crazy magic sword. I'm too embarrassed to bully you." On the little lotus peak, Fansong was revealed by the Taoist boy who had been reading all along. His small face turned white and red, with a somewhat awkward expression. The immeasurable sword is his master Zhao Yuzhen. No, it should be said that it is their top sword technique in Qingcheng Mountain. How could he possibly learn at his age? Upon hearing that he had been mocked by his senior brother, the little Taoist rushed forward with open teeth and claws. "Zhao Shi, I'll kill you." On the hillside of Qingcheng Mountain, in a courtyard, a young Taoist was sitting under a peach tree at random, and a wooden sword engraved with the word "Peach Blossom" was inserted into the soil beside him. He was still holding a gourd in his hand, with a red rope tied in the middle. The gourd and the red rope complement each other, and he shook the gourd in his hand. He looked at the direction of the peak of Lotus Peak and shook his head with a smile. "The peach blossoms are blooming again, I really want to see that sword again." A disciple dressed in a Taoist robe outside the courtyard knocked on the gate of the courtyard, which was almost silent in this usual day. "Master, the leader wants you to come over." The young Taoist whispered upon hearing the words, "What's up?" "If it's not a big deal, I won't go over." Upon hearing these words, the disciple outside the door twitched his lips. This unreliable young master, despite his young age, had an exceptionally high seniority. He often stood up for the leader's pigeon, which he had become accustomed to. Today, an old immortal came up from our mountain. The leader said that he had some involvement with you and even instructed him to go and see him. Upon hearing the voice of a disciple outside the door, the Taoist dressed in a purple robe slowly stood up. In the face of right and wrong, he rarely let his own temperament prevail. He casually put the small gourd into his sleeve, glanced at the wooden sword inserted under the peach tree, and casually asked, "What is the name of that old immortal?" The Taoist outside the door thought for a moment before continuing to speak. "It seems to be called Tianchen." After a while, there was no movement in the courtyard. The little Taoist standing outside frowned, thinking to himself, would this young master still stand up as the leader of the sect this time? Just the next moment, a warm voice came into his ears. "Let's go." This old immortal indeed has a chance to see him. As soon as he looked up, he saw the handsome young master uncle, whose warm and jade-like face only had a few more stubbles. As time passed, there were still traces left on him. Yes, the young Taoist respectfully performed a salute to the head and then led the way ahead. On the Lotus Peak, Li Fansong and Zhao Shou, one or two people, rested on a blue stone and looked at the white clouds, green dogs, and misty sea in the mountains. Li Fansong didn't know what was on his mind, so he turned to Zhao Shi and said, "Senior brother, I have come up with another good move. Next time, I will definitely not lose to you again." Zhao Shou twitched his lips and said, "I asked you to learn from nature. You go learn to steal peaches from the monkeys on the mountain. Do you dare to use this move in front of your master? If you use this vulgar move again next time, see if I'll beat you up." Upon hearing Zhao Shi's words, Li Fansong chuckled and didn't pay much attention. Although Zhao Shi is a senior brother, he has never practiced swordsmanship and only studies Taoist scriptures, only practicing Taoist techniques. In terms of martial arts, he is now able to surpass Zhao Shou one by one, because Zhao Yuzhen has already started teaching him how to practice swordsmanship, but he has no use for those skills. Just now, the confrontation between the two was still Wang Bakwen and Mad Magic Sword. He likes this way and likes to play around with Zhao Shi. Although Zhao Shi often talks nonsense about being the number one in the world, he doesn't take it to heart. In his heart, Zhao Shi is always the big brother who meticulously leads him to get started, the brother who makes his own bed and helps him cover it. As for the number one in the world, since Zhao Shi had this idea, it would be the same to help him retrieve it himself. He would then claim to be the second in the world. Of course, this is just the idea of the little boy at present. He has never experienced the young bird in the Jianhu and is dreaming of freedom. But if neither of them is wearing a panda eye, perhaps it would be more convincing. Zhao Shi gently extended his right hand and shook it in the void, as if he had grasped the top of the Lotus Peak. The mountain wind flowing through him also gently closed his eyes. Fan Song, in fact, different paths lead to the same goal. Whether it's practicing swordsmanship or cultivating oneself, one will always reach that step in the end. Fan Song's eyes were a bit suspicious. Today's Zhao Shi made him feel a bit mysterious, as if he knew he had already started practicing swordsmanship. Zhao's Huyuan.com, but on second thought, he couldn't help but shake his head in his heart. How could this be? He was useless at all, not a single move was useless. What is it? Fan Song casually asked. Zhao Shi extended his small hand again and looked at the pattern in his palm that had not yet fully opened. He said softly, "I heard that there are 5 great sword immortals in this world. Lone Sword Immortal, Angry Sword Immortal, Confucian Sword Immortal, Snow Moon Sword Immortal, Master, and Dao Sword Immortal. They are all outstanding in the carefree heavenly realm, unparalleled in the world. What kind of realm do you think is above the mystical realm?" Upon hearing these words, Fan Song showed a bitter smile on his face. The realm was still too far away for them, and they were not even considered mainstream at the moment. Warriors are divided into 9 levels, they haven't even touched the threshold. Zhao Yuzhen often teaches them not to be too ambitious, as it can affect their mood and even hinder their speed, causing them to be harmed by obstacles in perception. Zhao Shou saw that Li Fansong did not speak or demand anything. Fansong did not know that emotions were understandable, but he knew that that realm was called a fairyland. On the immortal mountain hanging alone overseas, there exists a true fairyland, and he vaguely remembers that person's name is Moe. The opponent's practice is not swords, but cultivation. As it happens, Qingcheng Mountain, which has a deep foundation, also has such a skill. It is the book in his hand. Its name is called Tao Jing. The people on the mountain all know that they are an outsider who does not practice swordsmanship, but no one knows that there is a breath inside their body that does not belong to internal power, taking root in the Purple Mansion. He looked into the distance, into the sea of clouds, and towards the peak with only a small section left. He smiled lightly and reached out to scratch the void, as if he had cut through the entire sky. Chapter 2. You are lucky in Qingcheng Mountain. You are listening at novel.full.audio. Yu Xin, you're here. In the Qingcheng Mountain Hall, the current leader of Qingcheng Mountain, Wang and his party saw the purple-robed Taoist coming in and nodded their heads gently. Zhao Yuzhen is his younger martial brother and a real talent of Tianzong. The Tianchen and Wuyin of Qingcheng Mountain are concentrated on one person. It's conceivable how amazing the other person is. At a young age of only 20, the name Dao Jian Xian has already spread throughout the world. Together with Luo Qingyang, Yan Zhantian, Li Hani, and Xia Xian, they are known as the 5 great sword immortals. Li Suzhen, the former leader of Qingcheng Mountain, made a divination for him. If Zhao Yuzhen did not go down, Qingcheng Mountain would be immortal for 50 years. If he went down, it would not only endanger himself, but also cause great disasters in the world. And this matter was also known by the national teacher from Bailey, who was the one in front of him. Tianchen. When Li Suzhen was finally ordained, the national teacher had personally come, and Li Suzhen also asked this old friend to help take care of his disciple. Over the years, Zhao Yuzhen has always followed his teacher's orders and never left Qingcheng Mountain. Even if it happened in the past year, he didn't want to leave. I've met Senior Qi. Seeing Qi Tianchen, Zhao Yuzhen made a bow. Qi Tianchen shook the floating dust in his hand, chuckled, and bowed. Lu Lao Dao has taken you as his disciple, and the old man really envies you. If nothing unexpected happens, you, as a few sword immortals living side by side, are the fastest and most likely person to step into that legendary realm. Upon hearing Qi Tianchen's words, Wang Yixing stroked his already grayed beard and humbly said, Master Guo praised me. Even if my junior brother really steps into that realm, it won't have much impact on the whole world. Zhao Yuzhen just smiled lightly and didn't speak. For him, practicing is like eating and drinking water, it's natural and he doesn't have such a strong desire for fame and fortune. When Qi Tianchen heard Wang Yixing's words, a hint of profound meaning flashed in his eyes. He knew that Zhao Yuzhen couldn't go down the mountain. Wang Yixing was telling him that even if Zhao Yuzhen really entered the mysterious realm, he wouldn't interfere with the court or the martial arts world. By the way, I came today to offer an incense stick to my old friend. It has been 5 years since I wandered around, and things have changed. When he saw Zhao Yuzhen, Qi Tianchen also explained the purpose of his trip. Speaking of which, as a national teacher from Bailey, he didn't have much to do on weekdays and had a lot of leisure time. That's why he had the time to go out and meet his old friends. Upon hearing Qi Tianchen's words, Wang Yixing and Zhao Yuzhen also felt a bit sad in their eyes. Although Taoism emphasizes forgetting emotions too much, there are some people and things that cannot be easily forgotten. The two of them gave a gift to Qi Tianchen one after another, which was their gratitude to each other as younger generations. After the pilgrimage, Wang and his party did not accompany him anymore. Instead, Zhao Yuzhen accompanied the national teacher and wandered around Qingcheng Mountain. I heard you've also taken on an apprentice. I never expected that when I first saw you, I was still a little bit taller than a table. Upon hearing these words, Zhao Yuzhen's eyes also flashed with a hint of nostalgia. With a clear mind, Zhao Yuzhen didn't think much, but took the opportunity to say, speaking of which, that little guy is similar to when my master took me up the mountain back then. He is a hard-working little guy, probably destined to be with me. Hearing what Zhao Yuzhen said, Qi Tianchen couldn't help but become interested. The story that Zhao Yuzhen was taken up the mountain by the Tianchen of Qingcheng Mountain was very mysterious. It is said that when Zhao Yuzhen was first born, he was born with a strange vision, and there were even rumors of a rainbow shining between his eyebrows. Is it difficult for Zhao Yuzhen to accept disciples like this? Just as Qi Tianchen was thinking this, Zhao Yuzhen seemed to have guessed Qi Tianchen's thoughts and smiled, saying, "Senior, I was wrong this time. That little guy is not like me, he is a tired and lazy guy. He always knows how to read books and teach him how to practice swordsmanship, but he says he's just a novice, abandoning his humble shoes and bragging all day, saying that he will be the best in the world in the future." Upon hearing Zhao Yuzhen's words, Tianchen was momentarily taken aback and then burst into laughter. This kind of little guy is really interesting. The number one in the world is not a good name, just as my master said back then, every generation has its own talent, and each generation is stronger than the last. It's an interesting little guy, but I want to see him. Does he know that even if his master has become a sword immortal, he dare not say he is the best in the world? Upon hearing Tianchen's words, Zhao Yuzhen smiled and shook her head. He didn't care about the number one person in the world. He only cared about that person, but after waiting for so many years, she never came back. He and Fansong are currently at Xiaolianhua Peak, I'll guide the way. Zhao Yuzhen felt Zhao Shi's position for a moment, and then with a gentle move, another sword in his room. The Qingxiao sword flew over in an instant. Seeing this sword, Tianchen's eyes couldn't help but squint under his white eyebrows. As an old friend of LV Suzhen, he was very clear about what this sword meant. It seems that Zhao Yuzhen has been designated as the next generation leader of Qingcheng Mountain. "Senior, do you want to use it together?" Zhao Yuzhen lightly exerted force under his feet and stepped on the Qingxiao sword, then asked Tianchen again. Tianchen smiled and shook his head. The meaning of the sword was extraordinary. Zhao Yuzhen, as a determined leader, was able to defend the sword, but he could not step on it. If he did go up, he would probably become enemies with Qingcheng Mountain. Of course, he did not believe that Zhao Yuzhen was digging a pit for him. He still had some understanding of this young man, and perhaps the other party did not take this sword seriously and did not seek external things. This was also the best state of mind for cultivation, no wonder his progress would be so fast. Watching the young man with a sword soaring into the sky, Tianchen couldn't help but sigh softly. "LV Lao Dao, you have taken in a good disciple." That's great, that's great." As Tianchen lifted up the true qi in his body, he also rose up from the ground, lightly tapping his feet and riding away against the wind. On a small mountain not far from Xiaolianhua Peak, Zhao Yuzhen jumped off the Qingxiao sword and found the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Then, he sat on a thick branch of a giant pine tree and looked toward Xiaolianhua Peak from afar. At this moment, Li Fansong had already left, and there was only Zhao Shou left at Xiaolianhua Peak. The book in his hand had been reinserted back into his waist by him. At that moment, he was sitting on the large blue stone where he and Li Fansong had been lying before, watching the clouds and waves below the mountain peak, and his right hand was gesturing wildly, childlike and playful. Later, Tianchen also came here and looked at the child from a distance. "What is he doing?" Tianchen looked a bit confused and couldn't help but ask. Zhao Yuzhen shook her head gently and said, "I don't know, this little guy has been in this situation many times, but I didn't understand it anyway." Tianchen frowned. Zhao Yuzhen had a pure heart, so he probably didn't deceive himself. But that child's movements were also too strange. If it weren't for Zhao Yuzhen not saying that his disciple was a fool, he would have thought that this little guy wouldn't be a fool, right? "Didn't you ask?" Zhao Yuzhen thought for a moment and said again, "Yes, he said he was playing hide and seek." Upon hearing this answer, Tianchen's eyebrows furrowed even tighter. "What is this hide and seek?" "It's better to say I don't know." Finally, Tianchen sighed lightly, unable to understand. This is the first time he can't understand a person. Since he didn't understand what he was doing, he set his gaze on the little guy himself. In the next moment, the famous Bailey national teacher couldn't help but widen his eyes, as if he had seen something incredible. After holding it for a long time, it was almost time for Tianchen to hold back his internal injury. It was only then that Tianchen held back such a sentence. You Qingcheng Mountain are lucky. Chapter 3. The shock of national teacher Tianchen, learning from heaven and earth. You are listening at novel full.audio. The senior praised me. This little guy is too lazy. When I was his age, I had already learned the Tai Lion technique. On Qingcheng Mountain, a magnificent ancient pine, Zhao Yuxian's tone was still so flat. Tianchen shook the floating dust in his hand and his old face couldn't help but twitch. If Zhao Yuxian had strict requirements for these peculiar masters and disciples, he wouldn't have believed the little guy in front of him. He was still so lazy, which caused the current situation. There must be reasons why Zhao Yuxian indulged in it. Don't waste such a talented and beautiful jade. Why don't you let him join my sect? I'll take care of him for you for 2 years. In Tianchen's eyes, the little guy sitting on the big blue stone in the distance was not as usual. Those who practice Taoism should first look at their qi and then at their appearance. Just like Zhao Yuxian, he is extremely lucky, which embodies the natural and martial luck of Qingcheng Mountain. His head is intertwined, and even forms a canopy. Of course, this is also an anomaly that can only be seen by experts in Taoism. And the little guy on the other side has an extraordinary head, with a strange beast lying on top of it, a combination of turtles and snakes, which is the sacred beast of their Taoism. Its northern position is Xuanwu. Tianchen, who had already entered the Tao, naturally knew what such a vision meant. He was a talented and beautiful jade with even more talent than Zhao Yuxian. To put it bluntly, such a talent is rare in his life. If he patiently teaches, he may even surpass his junior brother, Moe, in the future. Upon hearing Tianchen's words, Zhao Yuxian smiled awkwardly. My senior brother also knows Shi. If the senior wants to accept the disciple, I have no objection, but you also know that person, my senior brother. Upon hearing Zhao Yuxian's words, Tianchen sighed helplessly. Compared to Zhao Yuxian, that Wang Yixing is like an old antique. Although he is not as old as himself, his mind is very rigid. If he wants to snatch people from that younger generation, the difficulty is probably just like the Shu Road outside. The Shu Road is difficult, harder than reaching the sky. Does he know his talent? Looking at the talented and beautiful jade being raised in a free range, Tianchen also asked with some sadness in his heart. If it were an ordinary person, it would be fine. Tianchen has seen many talents in recent years, such as Lang Yiqing, Lei Mengsha, and Bai Li Dongjun. However, the current situation is not limited to this. The Xiaoyao Heavenly Realm may be the pinnacle for ordinary people, but for those on the opposite side, it may just be a halfway stop. So Tianchen couldn't bear to see how Qingcheng Mountain wasted such talent. Zhao Yuxian's legs swayed on the pine tree and continued, only senior brother and I know. Shi doesn't know, but now the senior also knows. Tianchen shook his head lightly and said with a hint of resentment, what a waste. If it weren't for this person being your disciple, the old man wouldn't be able to snatch it. If he were your senior brother with that little cow nose, the old man wouldn't have taken him away. Zhao Yuxian smiled awkwardly, but he also recognized the regret in Tianchen's tone. After thinking about it, he said, it's not like that. The little guy in Qingcheng Mountain Road has the Taoist scripture with him. Upon hearing these words, Tianchen furrowed his brow. He seemed to have heard of the Tao Te Ching somewhere before. Of course, for this old immortal, what he was thinking was not the Tao Te Ching written by Laozi. After a while, I don't know what came to mind. Tianchen's face lit up, and the hint of regret on his face quickly faded away. He stood on the branches of the ancient pine tree, reaching out to stroke his graying beard, silent, with only the sound of the wind echoing from the mountaintop. For a long time, Tianchen said again, is it the one left by Qingxian ancestor? Zhao Yuxian nodded. Tianchen nodded lightly and said, if that's the case, then it wouldn't be considered a waste. His tone was somewhat emotional, as if that Taoist scripture was something extraordinary, but the last sentence was a waste of time. I don't know if it's referring to that little guy or that Taoist scripture. However, when the two of them looked at the little Taoist on the little lotus peak again, Tianchen's eyes became a bit strange. With such talent, the other party cannot be a dull person. What exactly is this little guy doing? This also added a touch of exploration to the eyes of the northern Chinese teacher in front of him. At this moment, he couldn't help but recall what Zhao Yuzhen had said to him before. Hide and seek. He naturally understands the games that this child plays. After all, he has also come from that time. But generally speaking, hide and seek requires several people, and one person cannot play this game. Following this train of thought, Tianchen couldn't help but think again. If that little guy counts as one, then who is he playing hide and seek with? It is said that there is only a narrow line between genius and madman. Many times, the ideas of those geniuses are incomprehensible to ordinary people, which is also the reason why some people are tied to the cross and burned alive. As he watched, Tianchen couldn't help but feel a little lost in thought. The little hand that the little doll on the other side had poked out, grabbing it without any trace, as if trying to catch something. If he didn't know that the other person was an extraordinary genius, he would probably only consider them a fool. But now he doesn't think so anymore. Zhao Yuzhen, the sword immortal on the side, had already slipped one leg off the branch and leaned his head against the thick trunk of the ancient pine tree. His eyes were half closed, and the mountain breeze brushed his face, looking quite contented. Dao can be said, very Dao. Name can be said. Zhao Yuzhen suddenly spoke up. Upon hearing these words, Tianchen suddenly felt a transparent feeling in his heart for some reason. This is the first sentence of the true Taoist scripture, and also the sentence being spoken. The Tao is like that, both mysterious and elusive. Then when he looked at the little guy again, a sudden flash of light appeared in his eyes, and a somewhat unfamiliar word appeared in his mind. Enlightenment. He was stunned and looked at the little guy again. In no time, a hint of bitterness ran through the corner of the mouth of the Chinese teacher from Bailey. The little guy in his eyes was still grabbing something haphazardly, clearly grasping that Tao. The wind in the mountains brushes past, leaving a sound, taking away warmth and floating dust. This is the wind. The mist rising from the mountaintop obscures the view, takes away the sound, leaving only silence, and this is fog. All things in the world, learn from nature. Only a very small number of world-shaking talents in Taoism can achieve this step. As soon as he thought of this, Tianchen let out a soft sigh in his heart. He couldn't help but think that perhaps only a master like Zhao Yuzhen could cultivate such a disciple. This little guy he can't teach. Finally, he remembered the joke Zhao Yuzhen made when talking about this disciple. Tianchen couldn't help but feel a little emotional. The number one in the world, maybe it won't take many years at all. Amazing little guy. Chapter 4. Tianchen and Zhao Shouwen's first meeting, presenting merit and stepping on the clouds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Little one, can you tell me what you're doing? Qingcheng Mountain, on the small lotus peak, Zhao Shi suddenly heard a voice behind him, which startled him. Just now he didn't hear any footsteps, which indicates that the other person is a master. With a sudden change in his mind, he carefully turned his head and prayed in his heart that this person must not be those challengers who came to admire him. Zhao Yuzhen's reputation as a sword immortal has spread throughout the world, attracting many challengers. The origins of those people are varied. There are all kinds of people, and even some play cards against the rules. For this reason, he has suffered a lot. Fortunately, Zhao Yuzhen Awesome can save himself in the end. But when he saw an old man with a fairy-like demeanor, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief in his heart. Hello, old man. At least it's not those young people who are full of passion and eager to pour water all over them. The other party is so old that they shouldn't be challengers who come for the sake of fame. Zhao Shi thought this way and made a bow to the other party. I didn't do anything, senior brother. They were doing their homework, and I sneaked out to catch my breath. Faced with a stranger, he naturally wouldn't truthfully explain what he was doing, but instead made up a fairly standard reason. Not all young people at this age are like this. They can't sit still and enjoy playing. It's a common occurrence to sneak out and play when the senior uncles and brothers in charge are not paying attention. Upon hearing Zhao Shi's answer, the old man stroked his beard and smiled long. Zhao Yu is really right. He is indeed a lazy little guy, but if you sneak out, you won't be afraid of your master spanking you. Zhao Shi was stunned when he heard the words. Hearing the tone of the man in front of him, he clearly knew his master, but he didn't have half an impression of him. Although there were many old men with white hair and beard on Qingcheng Mountain, he had seen all of them. He has a good memory. If he doesn't forget everything, it's not much worse. When he picked up the book the year before last, he saw the old man of Qingcheng Mountain all over. Zhao Shi rummaged through his mind but couldn't find anyone similar to him. He couldn't help but ask tentatively, did the senior come to find my master? Tianchen felt quite amused when he saw Zhao Shi like this. The little guy in front of him had a different mindset than his age, and he wanted to test it. So he continued, no. Hearing this, Zhao Shou blinked. Didn't he come to Qingcheng Mountain to find Zhao Yuzhen? There isn't even 100 people, isn't the other person lying to him? Who is that senior looking for? Tianchen chuckled and said, what if I say I'm here to find you? Zhao Shi felt quite strange upon hearing these words and asked for his own help. He is a little transparent in Qingcheng Mountain. Even the martial brothers of the same generation know few of them. How did they know that they exist? And why is the other party looking for themselves? With a thud in his heart, this old man couldn't have come for his own book, could he? He looks like the leader of Qingcheng Mountain and his followers. Maybe he is a monk, so he is interested in that book. As soon as Zhao Shou thought of this, he instinctively turned his body to one side and blocked the book inserted in his waist behind him. Then he spoke up and asked, do you dare to ask the senior's high name? It seemed that he had noticed Zhao Shi's movements, and Tianchen smiled and shook his head. Why, are you afraid that I might snatch your book? You never thought that if it weren't for meeting your master, how could I have said that in the beginning? Upon hearing this, Zhao Shi awkwardly smiled. Master has taught us that the heart of guarding against others cannot be ignored. Please forgive me, senior master. Tianchen saw that Zhao Shi was quite ancient and supernatural, and laughed heartily. However, he didn't believe the other person's words now. People like Zhao Yuzhen wouldn't teach people these things. Who is I? You can guess. If you're right, how about I give you a gift to meet you? Then Tianchen smiled and said. When Zhao Shi heard this, he was basically sure that the other side was not a villain. After all, they had been saying these words for a long time. His master Zhao Yuzhen was an old man who had been living in a house for decades. He didn't leave the gate on weekdays. He must have been aware of the situation here based on his cultivation. He hasn't appeared, which means that the old man in front of him is not an enemy of Qingcheng Mountain. Then he spoke up and said, is there any hint? When we first meet, the senior can't just say nothing, let me guess. I can't guess that. Tianchen nodded when he heard Zhao Shi's words. He heard Zhao Yuzhen say that Zhao Shi has never been down Qingcheng Mountain since he was born. He doesn't know anything about things outside the mountain. It's really difficult for the other party to guess his identity. After thinking for a moment, Tianchen spoke up again and said, although I am a cultivator, I am not really a carefree person. Unlike you who can do whatever you want and care about the big things in the world. When Zhao Shou first heard each other's words, he was almost speechless. Who is really a carefree person in the world of life? These words are not in vain. Even Zhao Yuzhen, who has become a sword fairy, is confined to Qingcheng Mountain and can't leave. However, in the final sentence, Zhao Shi's expression changed. Not everyone can care about major issues in the world. Although the book says that everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the world, that is just a talk, asking those who cannot eat enough to care about major issues in the world. It's really not realistic. An old man who practices Taoism is still an old man who cares about the world's affairs, and also makes friends with Qingcheng Mountain. Such people are not many in Zhao Shi's impression. Suddenly a name jumped into his mind, which shocked Zhao Shi. Tianchen. The national teacher of Bailey. Is the senior's name taboo the same as the heavens and the earth? Upon hearing the other party's words, Tianchen was taken aback. He had no doubt that Zhao Shi could guess his identity and went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but he didn't expect the other party to reveal it in one fell swoop. Subconsciously, he said, "Do you know me?" Seeing that the other party did not deny, Zhao Shi let out a bitter smile. "I didn't expect to be guessed correctly by myself." Immediately he saluted respectfully. Zhao Yuzhen of Qingcheng Mountain sits down and disciple Zhao Shi has seen the national master. Tianchen waved his hand and said with a smile, "People who practice Taoism don't need to be polite." After hesitating for a moment, Zhao Shi spoke again and said, "There are many people who practice Taoism, but there are not many in my heart who care about family and national affairs. And my master once told me about the relationship between Master Qi and him, so I guess it's your old man." Upon hearing Zhao Shi's explanation, Tianchen couldn't help but have a sudden realization. This statement was a perfect coincidence. However, he did not default on what he had said before. Tianchen took out a small booklet from his sleeve and handed it to Zhao Shi. "I keep my word. Since you can guess my identity, this book can be considered a meeting gift." Zhao Shi hesitated for a moment and did not immediately take it over. After all, it was the first time they had met, so it was not good to just accept someone else's things like this. Elderly gift, dare not resign. "Shi, accept it." At this moment, a warm voice drifted over, and it was Zhao Yuzhen who was using 1,000 miles to transmit the message. Upon hearing his master's words, Zhao Shi immediately bowed to Tianchen before taking the booklet. He glanced around and saw a few words lying in the center of the booklet. "Stepping on the clouds." Zhao Shi, who had always been calm as water, broke through his defense this time. The best lightness skill in the world. Chapter 5. The first in the world, nothing is difficult in the world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I still think Qingcheng Mountain is good because it is far away from so many places in the north. Tianchen shook the floating dust and swept a little dust off the large blue stone where Zhao Shi had just lay, then naturally sat on it. Watching the surging sea of clouds under the little lotus peak, he spoke softly. When Zhao Shi heard this, he was stunned and didn't answer the question. Qingcheng Mountain was really good in his opinion, Zhong Linjuexiu, but it was definitely not as exaggerated as Tianchen said. The old national teacher seemed to have something in his mouth, but he didn't hear it, so he didn't know how to answer it. Seeing Zhao Shi still feeling a bit reserved, Tianchen shook his head and said with a smile, "Those who practice Taoism seek a sense of freedom. You don't have to be so reserved, just do whatever you want, just like your master." Although he doesn't seem to understand human relationships and worldly wisdom very well, it's definitely another kind of freedom. Seeing Tianchen so approachable, Zhao Shi felt a bit skeptical. When will the old immortal from Bailey be so easy to talk about? This is a national teacher, an old immortal who stopped a group of assassins from the Dark River in another time and space. One person was present and asked Su Changhe and others to hold their hands. He guessed that Su Changhe must have been extremely nervous at that time, afraid that the old immortal from the north would leave them all behind. Since he couldn't guess the reason, Zhao Shi decided not to guess, and then climbed up the big blue stone and sat down next to Tianchen. Tianchen nodded lightly when he saw Zhao Shi like this, and a hint of appreciation flashed in his eyes. He is the national teacher of Bailey, with a high status. In front of him, those young people are rarely calm and composed, let alone casual. And now this little guy, after knowing his identity, can quickly adjust his mindset, which is truly rare. Little one, if I didn't hear you wrong earlier, your name was Zhao Shi, right? Tianchen held the floating dust in his arms and did not look at Zhao Shi sitting next to him. Instead, he looked at the sea of clouds under the little lotus peak, or in other words, even further away. Zhao Shi nodded lightly, but did not go to see the old immortal. After sitting cross-legged, he replied in a slightly immature voice, to the extreme of emptiness, guard quietly. All things work together, and I observe recovery. Master said that only by holding quietly to purity can we glimpse the truth of all things and comprehend the Tao. That's why I have this name. Master gave me it, and I really like it. Upon hearing these words, Tianchen couldn't help but feel dumbfounded. However, on second thought, he also felt a sense of emotion. Perhaps this little guy's current state of mind was inseparable from Zhao Yuzhen's teachings. With his talent, if he really threw himself into the bustling world, was blinded by those colorful worlds, could not restrain the ape, could not subdue his will, and then the pearl would be shrouded in dust, it would be a pity. It's a great name. Tianchen didn't hesitate to praise himself, and then he said, I heard from your master that your goal is to be the best in the world. After thinking for a moment, Zhao Shi firmly said without any concealment, yes. Upon hearing Zhao Shi's answer, Tianchen remained calm on his face, but nodded inwardly. If this little guy had denied it at this moment, he would have been disappointed instead. Those who stand at the peak of the world will never doubt themselves, this is the mentality that must be possessed to become a strong person. At present, Zhao Shi is facing himself and the national teacher from Bailey, but he still does not change his original intention. This actually indicates that the little guy around him not only has the ability to surpass the world in talent, but also in character. That's not easy. Then Tianchen smiled, his expression seeming to be reminiscent. There is nothing difficult in the world, only those with a heart. Upon hearing Tianchen's words, Zhao Shi did not utter any more bold words, but responded softly. Tianchen laughed heartily. Well said. In fact, in this world, not only is it in practice, but it is also true in many other things. There is nothing difficult in this world. Zhao Shi heard that there were other things in Tianchen's words, but he couldn't guess what the specifics were. After all, the experience of this old immortal was not something he could imagine, whether it was cultivation, court experience, or the swords and swords in the martial arts world. So this time, Zhao Shi just listened quietly. After a while, a gust of wind blew from the little lotus peak, and Tianchen's floating dust scattered and drifted with the wind. Zhao, do you know who is the number one in the world now? Tianchen's gaze was deep and he said softly. Zhao Shi said somewhat uncertain, is it the wine fairy of Snow Moon City? Tianchen stroked his beard with a smile, without nodding or shaking his head. Instead, he spoke about the past of Bai Li Dongjun, his words filled with sadness. Since the battle of the Demon Sect's Eastern Expedition, the name of the 100-Mile East Lord has spread throughout the world. No one expected that battle back then. Yi Dingji, who defeated many sects, and many experts from the outer heaven, were unexpectedly defeated by him alone. As Zhao Shi listened to Tianchen talk about his past, he also felt some emotion in his heart. Time passed through this world, leaving behind several names, among which the most shining one was this wine immortal. Bai Li Dongjun claims to be a wine immortal, but his knowledge is mixed. Looking for the book Garden www.zhaosuiyuan.com, he is not miscellaneous but not refined. Instead, he holds a sword and becomes a sword immortal, wielding a sword to become a sword immortal, carrying a pot of wine with him, and instructing people all over the world to bind their hands. However, Tianchen suddenly changed his voice and said, unfortunately, the 100-mile East Lord did something wrong back then, and his own realm was so cramped that he couldn't move forward in the vast and carefree heavenly realm. Upon hearing this, Zhao Shi was taken aback. He was in a state of great freedom, which he had never heard of before. Later, Tianchen looked at Zhao Shi beside him and said again, "Anyway. Just consider him the number one in the world now. Have you ever thought about whether you can defeat him? Your goal is not so easy to achieve, you must be mentally prepared." Zhao Shi nodded. His goal was to be the best in the world, not to say that he was now the best in the world. Moreover, as Tianchen said, he roughly guessed another person, Moe. Perhaps he had already entered a fairyland at this moment. The talented people of the Jiangshan generation have emerged. Not to mention the 100-mile city lord, but to talk about the young people at present, they are all amazing. Speaking of this, Tianchen gave Zhao Shou a meaningful glance, but then talked about another person. "Zaya, do you know that there was a genius in the Bailey court who entered the realm of freedom at the age of 13? Even the 100-mile East Lord did not have such incredible skills at his age back then." Although Zhao Shi did not pay special attention, he also knew who the other party was talking about. Xiao Chuha, the 6th Prince of Bailey, was indeed a genius. After thinking for a moment, Zhao Shi said leisurely, "Is that right? Perhaps that person will be a good opponent." Tianchen was taken aback and immediately burst into laughter. He knows that the future will definitely be even more exciting than this generation. Chapter 6. Closing, Leaving, and Learning Sword. You are listening at novel-full.audio. Master, why doesn't senior brother need to practice swordsmanship? In a small yard in Qingcheng Mountain, a little Taoist boy was standing in a horse stance, and his legs began to tremble. But the purple-robed Taoist under the peach tree turned a blind eye and ate the peach leisurely. When he heard the Taoist boy's complaint, he said, "If you don't want to practice, you don't need to practice. I can also relax." Upon hearing the other person's words, the little Taoist suddenly crawled his forehead full of black lines. Is the other party's herding style teaching really reliable? I still have to compete for the second place in the world. If I don't practice swordsmanship, what will I do to compete for? Is it difficult to steal peaches with the monkeys I learned in the mountains? As soon as he thought of this, he couldn't help but look at the purple-robed Taoist under the tree. If he were to steal peaches, would his master beat him up? The speaker was Zhao Yuzhen, the Tao sword immortal, and his disciple Li Fansong. Hold on for another 15 minutes. Zhao Yuzhen glanced at her disciple and casually said. Li Fansong's face turned bitter, it will take another 15 minutes. He felt like he couldn't hold on for a breath, but after a quarter of an hour, Li Fansong sat on the ground with both hands propped up, panting heavily. Zhao Yuzhen was really right. He can really hold on for a quarter of an hour, no more, no less. But Zhao Yuzhen, who was standing beside her, looked at her disciple and shook her head in her heart. She said, "If you compare goods, you will die. Not to mention others, let's talk about himself." He learned the power of the dragon elephant at the age of 6 and studied the infinite sword technique at the age of 11. At the age of Fansong, he may have been in a comfortable state for a long time, but he can't even hold his sword well. As for the other one, he still hasn't understood it yet. His talent is good, and he's not average good. Do you think if he hasn't practiced? He spends all day reading that book, sometimes even sleeps all day and night. He has also read that book. There's nothing novel about it. But up to now, he doesn't have any internal strength in his body, nor does he practice swordsmanship. He has only learned the power of the dragon elephant with both hands, and it seems like it's not true at the moment. When he goes down the mountain in the future, if someone beats him and he can't go down, no one will help him vent his anger. He lifted his head and looked at the direction of the top of the little lotus peak, and couldn't help but sigh twice in his heart. How come my disciple, who I have taken in these past 2 days, doesn't make me worry so much? On the other side, on the small lotus peak of Qingcheng Mountain, Zhao Shi scratched his head in some distress. Xiaoyao Heavenly Goddess, is this the ancestor of Qingxian? At the beginning, he was good, but he had to do something like this. It's over, he jumped into the pit. Zhao Shi looked at a line of words in the book and almost cursed loudly. Reading a book 100 times reveals its true meaning. The last few dozen pages of this Taoist scripture have nothing but these small regular script, densely written on the pages, making one's scalp tingle. This book has been subjected to an inexplicable ban, and unless the previous page is fully understood, the next page, even if opened, will remain blank. This is also the reason why Zhao Shi wanted to curse. After finally cultivating here, he only saw these 8 words, and the aura inside his purple mansion was extremely domineering. It was completely impossible for him to transfer to any internal skill, which cut off his path. Helpless, he had to pick up the book again and start reading from scratch. He watched and comprehended again and again until he saw a sentence. He had a different idea, so he went to Qingcheng Mountain Road Collection and Book Mountain to find the answer. Spring has passed and autumn has arrived, and the flowers have withered and bloomed. This time, it has been 8 years of cold and heat. Until his master Zhao Yuzhen also left a beard on his lips, his younger martial brother finally practiced the immeasurable sword technique, and Qingcheng Mountain accepted a little guy named Feishuan, until Qingcheng Mountain almost did not know that Zhao Yuzhen, the sword immortal, had a disciple. A young man with abundant divine jade bones walked out of a thatched cottage at the top of Xiaolianhua Peak. I didn't expect such a fate to happen with just 1 drink and 1 peck, truly worthy of being the founder of Qingxian. The young man leaped into the air without seeing any fluctuation in his internal strength, and he flew out towards the foot of the mountain like a lone swan. If someone sees this scene, they will probably be stunned and not use their internal strength for lightness skills. There is only one lightness skill in this world, the best in the world. Stepping on the clouds. 1/10 of a defeat is one calamity, and before this heaven and earth, there have been countless calamities. In a small yard on the mountainside, Zhao Yuzhen, who has become the leader of Qingcheng Mountain, is teaching his apprentice Li Fansong the final form of infinite swordsmanship. Suddenly, his eyebrows furrowed and he said coldly, "Who is your excellency? It's not kind of you to take it without asking." Li Fansong was taken aback for a moment. He tried to feel the situation around him, but didn't notice anything unusual. Then he turned to look at his master. Zhao Yuzhen shook her head helplessly. If it weren't for her sword immortal realm, it would probably be difficult to detect the existence of that person. At this moment, a gentle voice sounded outside the door. "I pay my respects to master." Upon hearing these words, Zhao Yuzhen and Li Fansong were both stunned. Who else could call Zhao Yuzhen a master? Senior brother. Li Fansong rushed out with some surprise, while Zhao Yuzhen let out a sigh with some emotion. The little guy finally came down the mountain. As soon as Li Fansong opened the doors, he saw a young man with a rich spirit in jade bones standing outside the door, looking for a book garden www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Although it was a bit unfamiliar, he could still determine the identity of the person in front of him at a glance, Zhao Shi. Senior brother. Zhao Shi smiled and nodded, "Not bad, they are already in the realm of the immortal realm." Upon hearing these words, Li Fansong smiled and touched his own head. It was not easy for him to reach his current level, as he had truly cultivated it. He then felt Zhao Shi's realm for a moment, but the next moment, his face didn't change and he didn't have any inner strength. "Senior brother, why are you?" Zhao Shi shook his head lightly, gesturing for some words before saying anything more. He then walked into the courtyard and respectfully saluted Zhao Yu's true body. "Master, I have passed the level." Zhao Yuzhen nodded lightly. For Zhao Shi, his expectations were actually much greater than those of Li Fansong. After 8 years, seeing this disciple again in his own courtyard, he felt quite moved in his heart. However, regarding Zhao Shi's realm, he did not simply think that Zhao Shi was an ordinary person without any internal strength like Li Fansong. Because even if an ordinary person is powerful, they cannot silently come within 50 steps of him, making him unaware. What is your current state of mind? After thinking for a moment, Zhao Yuzhen still asked directly. Zhao Shi frowned and said with uncertainty, I'm not quite sure, it's strange, it's hard to say. A few words in a row, not to mention Zhao Yuzhen, even he himself is confused. But I should be able to learn swordsmanship now. The infinite sword. I accidentally learned it just now. Chapter 7. Take a look at the world. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Have you all learned it? On Qingcheng Mountain, a purple-robed Taoist stood upside down behind him with a peach-wood sword in his hand, and his eyes were full of doubts. If one method is universal, then all methods are universal. In recent years, I have gained nothing else, but this has greatly increased my cultivation level in my mental state. The principles contained in martial arts are almost easily understood at a glance. The infinite sword technique should ultimately be able to form a sword chi formation, relying on the internal breath of the initiator to absorb the power of heaven and earth, while also absorbing the great formation. If one can reach the wandering heavenly realm, it may be endless. The young man looked at the wooden sword in his hand, which had inexplicably turned into ashes, and let out a gentle sigh, but it was somewhat serious. Zhao Yuzhen was slightly taken aback when he heard his disciple's words. Zhao Shou spoke one by one to reveal the secrets of the heavens, which surprised him to the core. Such a vision that almost directly pointed to the essence of things is rare in the world. Shi, what realm are you in now? Is it a mystical realm? The two people speaking were Zhao Yuzhen and Zhao Shi. Upon hearing Zhao Yuzhen's words, Zhao Shi remained calm on Gu Bo's face and immediately smiled bitterly. He is really not clear about his current state. After all, even Qingcheng Mountain is the only one who can cultivate the Taoist scripture, and only he can cultivate the Taoist scripture. There is no sect elders to refer to, and there is no record in the Taoist collection. He is not sure what his current state is. Master, I'm really not sure about my disciple. Although I have gained something from the Dao Jing left by Master Qingxian, there is no reference or reference for reference, and there are no classics for comparison. It's really impossible to make a conclusion. Zhao Yuzhen touched his already bearded chin and said, as long as it's not useless, it's okay. Individuals have their own destiny. Perhaps this miraculous skill will play an unimaginable role when you reach higher levels in the future. As one of the most successful ancestors in Qingcheng Mountain, our ancestor Qingxian will never be immortal. Unfortunately, for hundreds of years, you are the only one in Qingcheng Mountain who has cultivated something. I can't give you more help. Zhao Shi smiled faintly upon hearing Zhao Yuzhen's words. Master, you're welcome. If it weren't for you taking your disciples up the mountain back then, I guess they would have been taken away by those things in the mountain. If that were the case, the disciples would have died a long time ago. And there was also the Dao Jing book, in which the disciples benefited greatly. Although it's still unclear what happened, there's a saying that goes, at the end of the road, all paths lead to the same destination. Everything just follows fate. Zhao Shi's temperament now bears a striking resemblance to Zhao Yuzhen's, perhaps due to his lack of exposure to the world's fireworks and his 8 years of indulgence in Taoist treasures. With every move he takes, there is a hint of Taoist heritage that exudes, making him truly natural. Upon hearing Zhao Shi's words, Zhao Yuzhen lifted her head and chuckled, realizing that she was in the right place. Master, can I have a look at this sword? Zhao Shi said softly, not knowing what was on his mind speaking. Zhao Shi pointed to the wooden sword in Zhao Yuzhen's hand, which was named Peach Blossom. Zhao Yuzhen was slightly stunned, then casually threw it towards Zhao Shi. Zhao Shi's big hand was in mid-air, as if fishing for the moon from the bottom of the sea. There was not much movement, but he grabbed the thing into his hand. He held the hilt in his right hand and formed a sword finger with his left hand. His fingertips brushed over the body of the peachwood sword, and a hint of admiration flashed in his eyes. The Xianyang sword embryo turned this naturally carved wooden sword into a true divine weapon, only half a chip worse than that Qingxiao sword. Zhao Yuzhen was not surprised that his apprentice revealed the true face of the wooden sword. Zhao Shi had been in the Taoist collection of Qingcheng Mountain for so many years. If this matter cannot be seen, then there is a problem. To put it bluntly, Zhao Shi's understanding of some things may be even more profound than his own. At this moment, Zhao Shi suddenly raised his eyebrows, and the aura inside his purple mansion split into a strand. It followed his unique meridians and then attached to this wooden sword. And afterwards, the breath inside the purple mansion seemed to open a hole, flowing out one by one, and began to run along the 8 extraordinary meridians in his body. Upon realizing this situation, Zhao Shi felt a bit flustered. He knew very well about the power of this extremely strange aura. When Zhao Yuzhen was practicing the infinite sword technique before, he felt Zhao Yuzhen's true energy, which was definitely not as strong and powerful as the nameless aura in his body. If those things riot within oneself, I will definitely not be safe, and even Zhao Yuzhen cannot be rescued. However, to his surprise, those breaths did not appear in the violent scene he had imagined, but were very quiet, like a soaring dragon suddenly turning into a gentle and charming little white rabbit. What's wrong? Zhao Yuzhen seemed to have noticed something unusual and couldn't help but ask for help from the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Zhao Shi shook his head, indicating that there was nothing wrong. After hesitating for a moment, he continued, "One day in the future, I may borrow my master's peach sword to use, but it's a fate. I hope my master will not hesitate to borrow the sword." After speaking, Zhao Shi returned the peach sword to Zhao Yuzhen. Upon hearing these words, Zhao Yuzhen felt lost in thought. He had a feeling that what Zhao Shi had done might be related to himself. It's okay, but it's best not to harm the innocent. Zhao Shi smiled and nodded, "That's natural." At this point, Zhao Shi and Zhao Yuzhen fell silent, and the small courtyard once again became quiet. The wind blew in the mountains, and a few peach blossoms fell gracefully, creating the April breeze of the human world. After a while, Zhao Shi spoke up and said, "Fansong has suffered a lot from you in these years. That kid can't sit still, jumps up and down, and is extremely anxious. Now that he can cultivate in this Vajra-mortal realm, he may have suffered a lot." Upon hearing Zhao Shi's words, Zhao Yuzhen also chuckled softly. "Huh, you're quite accurate. That kid always thought about being second in the world." Zhao Shi curved his lips and gently shook his head. "Is it the second best in the world? By the way, Master, I have been thinking critically lately and plan to walk down the mountain." Upon hearing this, Zhao Yuzhen's expression remained unchanged, as if she had already guessed Zhao Shi's thoughts. "Where are you planning to go?" Zhao Shi stood up and looked at the azure sky from afar. The green mountains seemed like guardians guarding the city, with his blue sleeves carried behind him. Go and see this world. Chapter 8. Going down the mountain, encountering by chance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Qingcheng Mountain, small lotus peak. Zhao Yuzhen looked at the worried young man beside him and whispered, "Fansong, don't worry. Although your senior brother hasn't cultivated yet, if he wants to escape, there aren't many people in the world who can catch up with him." And the boy beside him was none other than Li Fansong. He took out a small booklet from his arms and was stunned. There are 3 words on the booklet. Step on the clouds. This is exactly the first lightness skill in the world that Zhao Shi obtained from the old national teacher Qi Tianchen before. On the occasion of parting, it was given to Li Fansong. Originally, Li Fansong heard from Zhao Shi that it was a gift from Qi Tianchen and he said he didn't want anything. However, in the end, Zhao Shi said that the national teacher was an old immortal and wouldn't care about these things. Besides, He gave it to Li Fansong just to practice as a close person, not to spread it all over the rivers and lakes. After all, the main function of lightness skill is to escape life. With the help of treading on clouds, he can also have an extra chance of survival when wandering in the martial arts world in the future. Zhao Shi knows the people in the dark river, and when fighting, he doesn't care what kind of power you come from. Master, I also want to go down the mountain. Zhao Yuzhen heard his disciple's words and smiled lightly. Sure. As long as you practice the infinite sword, you can go wherever you want. But when something happens, don't expect me to save you. I can't go down the mountain. You should know about this, right? Upon hearing Zhao Yuzhen's words, Li Fansong's lips twitched. It was true that if something happened when he went down the mountain, he could only save himself. Zhao Yuzhen couldn't go down the mountain, as there were troops from Bailey guarding the area below. So master, can you rest assured that senior brother will come down the mountain on his own? Then Li Fansong seemed to have remembered something and asked in confusion. If you become a stepping on the clouds, you can also do whatever you want. Zhao Yuzhen replied nonchalantly. Upon hearing these words, Li Fansong's lips twitched. Stepping on the clouds was known as the world's top lightness skill, which was not just for fun. It may take him 10.5 days to use a few luck tricks to achieve it, but if he were to practice it, he might as well practice the infinite sword. I just don't know what senior brother will encounter when going down the mountain. In a town at the foot of Qingcheng Mountain, there was a young man with blue robes walking slowly on the street. The town was not big or small, and there were almost everything that should be, such as hotels, restaurants, escort agencies, as well as money shops, gambling houses, Qin Lu Chu house, and so on. Although sparrows are small, they have all 5 internal organs. Suddenly, the boy stopped at a corner of the street and looked at an old man sitting in front of a stall with 2 little girls tied in sheep's horns, staring at passers-by. Next to the stall, there is also a sign with the words, Iron Mouth Divine Cutting, written on it. Hey, this young master looks dignified at first glance. When I looked at him from a distance, I saw a spiritual light shining in his heavenly spirit. This is his face of wealth and prosperity. I think he is going to get rich soon. Do you want to come to the young master's place to calculate divination? No money. It seemed that the young man in the green robe was observing them, and the little old man came with his mouth open. The young man smiled and shook his head, but did not leave. Instead, he turned around and walked towards this small stall. There is a long wooden table in front of the small stall, with a stack of signatures on it, and a paper seal covering the entire table. There is a yin-yang tai chi bagua diagram in the middle of the table. In front of the table, there was also a bench. When the boy saw it, he smiled and said, Sir, you have quite a complete set of things. The little old man looked quite old, with a strand of goatee and a Taoist crown on his head. His clothes were also Taoist attire, but after all, the little old man looked out of place in these clothes for some reason. The little girl sitting next to him, dressed in a water green long dress, although a bit old, was very clean. Holding a string of tomatoes on sticks in her hand, a pair of nimble eyes were moving around. Seeing the boy looking at her, her little face flashed a red glow, and she hid behind the little old man, looking very cute. The little old man didn't make much movement when he saw this scene, just chuckled. This is Xiaolao's granddaughter. Her parents left early, and Xiaolao usually goes out to set up a stall. She doesn't trust her to be alone at home, so we take it with us. But don't worry, young master. Xiaolan is very sensible and won't talk nonsense. The boy chuckled softly when he heard the little old man's words. It's okay, anyway I'm not here for divination. The little old man's face turned cold upon hearing the boy's words, and he said with a disdainful expression, then the young master should leave. Don't disturb the little old man's business, he hasn't opened yet today. If no one comes to gossip this morning, the little old man will have to go hungry with Xiaolan. The young man couldn't help but be taken aback by the speed at which the other person changed his face. However, he then took out a small silver ingot from his sleeve, which didn't seem to weigh much, only about 1 or 2 silver coins. Then he threw it up and down in his own hand. "This old gentleman, I was originally planning to take care of your business. Since you are so snobbish, I am very sorry to contact Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Seeing the silver, the little old man's eyes lit up immediately. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and quickly said, "It's because the little old man was impolite. I'll compensate the young master, isn't it? Today, the young master is the young master's destined person. Whatever the young master wants to ask or calculate, just say it directly. The young master must know everything without hesitation." Upon hearing the old man's words, the young man chuckled. This old man is not as he said before. He doesn't want money yet, he probably wants money to death. It's snobbery, not impoliteness. The little girl in the green dress curled her lips when she heard her grandfather speak, and said with some disdain, "You are a snob." "Grandpa, I call it knowing the current affairs. What do you know, little fart boy? Go and eat your tomatoes on sticks." When the little old man heard what the little girl said, he seemed to be stimulated by something. He blew his beard and glared at the little girl. However, the little girl seemed to have known this for a long time and didn't care about it. So he sat on the stone pier beside him and ate the tomatoes on sticks in his hand. "My name is Zhao Huafan. I used to practice in the mountains and wasn't very familiar with the outside world. The old gentleman seems to be a knowledgeable person. Why don't you tell me about the current martial arts world and the court? If the gentleman can satisfy me, these 1 or 2 silver coins will be his." The little old man was overjoyed when he heard the young man's words and said, "Are you telling the truth? Let's say it first. The little old man knows a lot, but they are all from the general market. If you want to know any secrets, then the little old man can't say it." The young man shook his head with a smile and said, "It's okay. What I want to hear is some ordinary news. Besides, those hidden secrets in the martial arts world cannot be obtained for 1 or 2 silver coins. I still have a good idea of that." Chapter 9. Opening, Transforming into the World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, there are many sects in the martial arts world, some big and some small. I won't talk about those unknown young masters. Perhaps the young master doesn't want to listen either. I'll choose a few more famous ones to share with you. First of all, there is Snow Moon City, which is one of the top sects in the martial arts world. The 3 city lords are all figures standing at the peak of the entire martial arts world. The Wine Immortal by Li Dongjun, the Sword Immortal Li Hani, and the Spear Immortal Sikong Changfeng are all among the top experts in the world. Another thing is that there are no twin cities. Although the name is not as well known as Snow Moon City, it cannot withstand its profound heritage. The lord of the city, Song Yanhui, and several elders are also unfathomable. There is also the Qingcheng Mountain in front of us. This is a wonderful place. There is a sword immortal. The court has sent people here to guard it. Speaking of sword immortal, young master should know, right? At the stall, the little old man was eloquent and talked endlessly, as if there were too many things he could tell in this world. However, when it came to sword immortals, he couldn't help but glance at the young man. After all, the 5 great sword immortals in the world were famous. He guessed that the young master in front of him had heard of them, right? Zhao Huafan nodded and said, "I've heard of this before. They are recognized as the 5 most powerful experts in the world." The little old man nodded without refuting, and continued, "Then there are various martial arts forces intertwined, such as the Tang clan in central Sichuan, the Thunderbolt Hall Thunderbolt family in Jiangnan, sword tombs, and the Hidden River. By the way, there are also some forces outside the region. The little old man has only heard of them occasionally, and I don't know if they are true or false. It seems like they are called Tianchen. Zhao Huafan didn't speak, just nodded to indicate that he had heard. The little old man then sighed softly. The martial arts world is big and small, after all, wherever there are people, there is the martial arts world. However, there are only a few people who are famous. Whether the young master intends to make a name for himself or travel, some people cannot be avoided. Zhao Huafan gave the other person a meaningful glance in his eyes. This little old man really had something interesting to say, but it didn't seem like something an ordinary person could say. What about the court? Upon hearing these words, the little old man curled his lips and said, I don't know much about the court. I just heard that several princes of the emperor are more interested in the throne and engage in constant internal and external conflicts. Since the death of King Langia, the border has not been very quiet. As for the rest, it's not something that my fortune teller can handle. The young man named Zhao Huafan, upon hearing this, did not break his promise. He let out a gentle sigh, realizing that there were indeed some things that a fortune teller could not understand, and he did not force them. Afterwards, he threw the silver in his hand to the other party and stood up. By the way, what major events have happened in the martial arts world recently? The little old man received the silver and bit it on his mouth. After confirming that it was real, he chuckled. Today's work was much easier than every day, and he didn't need to waste his brain. He just needed to say everything he knew, and he could easily get his meal for several days. With a happy mood, he thought about the last question the other person asked and replied softly, not to mention, there is really a strange thing in the martial arts world. I heard that the master of forgetting worries in Hanshui Temple has been reborn, as if he died under the secret technique of the Rakshasa Hall. Speaking of master forgetting worries, the little old man's tone became somewhat mournful. The young man narrowed his eyes upon hearing this and whispered to himself, you didn't come as early as you did. It seems you can still catch up with that scene, but I don't know how much surprise that demon monk can bring you. The young man's voice was very low, and the little old man didn't hear what the other person was saying. Then the young man turned around and wanted to leave, but at the last moment, he unexpectedly stopped. Old man, fortune-telling is okay, but if you cheat by this thing, I would advise you. This is within the jurisdiction of Qingcheng Mountain. People on the mountain are all people of pure cultivation. They are not good at this mundane business. If you know someone is cheating on your own doorstep, I won't let you go. Of course, if you really have the ability to help people with divination, let me not say it. However, I also advise you to reveal the truth without authorization, which can damage a person's longevity. If you help a few more people calculate their fortune in a day, you may have to go see the Taoist ancestor in a few years. After listening to the young man's words, the little old man chuckled twice, indicating that he knew. The young man didn't say much and turned around before leaving. Until he couldn't see the back of the young man, the little old man couldn't help but say to Xiaolan, I said to be a good granddaughter. What do you think of this person? He's generous in his actions. Did you just help him check? When will we meet again next time? Hearing the little old man's words, Xiaolan put down the tomatoes on sticks in her hand and said with some emotion, fortunately, he didn't let us start a divination for him, otherwise we would make a fool of ourselves. This man's fate is very strange. It seems that something has been affecting him and covering his life. I can't guess exactly what it is. Speaking of this, Xiaolan still felt a bit distressed, as if she was feeling a bit depressed because she couldn't see clearly the fate of the young man just now. Zhao's.com hearing what Xiaolan said, the little old man's eyes flashed with surprise. This is the boundary of Qingcheng Mountain. They can survive here not by deceit, but by some real skills. He is a granddaughter with exceptional talent and a great talent for divination. At a young age, she is already even more powerful than this old guy. So when he heard his granddaughter's words, he couldn't help but burst into a cold sweat. He has never encountered a few people in this situation, but those people are all important figures in the martial arts world and even in the court. As soon as he thought of this, the little old man couldn't help but let out a soft sigh in his heart as he turned towards the direction where the young man had disappeared. Can this young man also be that kind of person? Transforming into Zhao Huafan was also a plan that Zhao Shi only thought of when he went down the mountain. After all, what he wanted to see was the most real world, the most real world. The name Zhao Shi may not be known by many people, but it does not mean that no one knows it. Just like by Xiaoxing from the martial arts world, if you want to investigate, you probably won't be able to hide it, so you might as well follow the example of the Yong'an King Xiao Chuha, pseudonym Zhao Huafan, and come and see this world firsthand. In the original work, a few young people with warm blood were able to have a smooth journey. In addition to their good talent, they were also their own identity. The disciples of Snow Moon City, Thunderbolt Hall, Lei family, and Qingcheng Mountain.Path Sword Immortal were enough to deter many people. But at the same time, it was also destined that they would not see more scenes. In the martial arts world, there were not only beauties and swords. Considering the purpose of his trip, Zhao Shi did not do it again. He came to see this world, he wanted to see this real world, the most real world. Chapter 10. The injustice says no words, why on earth? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, hurry up. The county magistrate is going to hear the murder case of Tofu Shishir wielding a knife. Tofu Shishir. Hi. It's the one from Shilin Lane. Can't you? This little lady looks harmless to humans and animals on weekdays. There's an old saying that goes, you can't judge a person by their appearance, and the sea cannot be measured. No one expected this little lady to have such a tough personality. What exactly happened? I heard that the official from Ximen drank some wine at the Songha Tower and wanted to flirt with her, but she stabbed that guy. Northwest Road, Zhao Huafan walked in an ancient city, listening to the words in his ear and these slightly familiar words, couldn't help but marvel at the aging secular world and the unfamiliarity of human hearts. However, he had never seen this ancient case before, and his heart moved as he followed the footsteps of the crowd towards the county government office. At the same time, he was muttering in his heart, if that tofu with the surname Pan from Shishir, that would be even more interesting. But then he shook his head again. He was a cultivator, isn't that a bad idea? After a while, he shook his head a bit funny again. Even if there really was a Wu Dalong, what would happen? Isn't he coming down the mountain to see this Lang Lang Chinkuan? You sure, what else do you have to say? In broad daylight, you committed crimes on the street, causing the West Gate to become disabled and inhumane. What's the difference between this and street murder? In the yamen, a woman wearing a scarf was kneeling on the ground, silent, with a numb expression in her eyes. The other was a man dressed in silk, who was in his 30s and had a slightly pale face. With the help of several servants, he stood aside. Among these two groups of people, there is also a person holding a folding fan, named Bao Sheng, who is a famous litigation lawyer here and specializes in helping people in litigation. The county magistrate of the yamen also knew what kind of person Shimen Fu was, which caused the current situation. It was likely due to the other party's own reasons, but Yu sure seemed determined and didn't speak up, leaving him at a loss for what to do. If this case is judged like this, it will not only be shameless towards the villagers, but also go against one's own will. The county magistrate's name is Su Hu, as his name suggests, and he has an extremely strong character. In the past, due to not fulfilling some of Emperor Mingda's political orders, he directly advised the emperor and was demoted to become a governor in the Northwest Road by Emperor Mingda. However, he still refused and continued to report until he was demoted to the point where he could no longer be demoted. Emperor Mingda simply stopped caring about the stones in this thatched pit. At this moment, the onlookers outside also began to whisper, "Hey, what do you think is going on? Why doesn't Tofu Shishir say a word? If she says 2 words, the county magistrate won't make a heavy judgment. Litigation lawyer Bao Xing snorted lightly when he saw the reaction of Tofu Shisha. He grabbed the folding fan in his hand, arched his hand, and said loudly, "Your Highness, this wicked woman who committed murder on the street with a knife has been proven guilty. If she doesn't speak, she will acquiesce. I hope your Highness can restore justice to Ximen. Lady Yu, do you have anything else to say?" Su Hu was stunned with a slap, and his tone was somewhat helpless. If you remained silent, he would have no choice. In the crowd, Zhao Huafan looked at the people from both sides and felt a bit strange in his heart. When the people on the road said about this matter, it should be said that Ximen Polyphonic Opera was in front, which was why this disaster occurred. Why didn't this Tofu Shisha say a word? And he observed that the county magistrate did not collude with these 2 people, but instead spoke up multiple times to make you speak up, but the problem was that you remained silent. What exactly is going on? And there is also an important point, Yu's whole person looks a bit numb. Did this Ximen regain control? Although we don't know what dynasty it was at the moment, it was also in ancient times when women valued chastity more. Can this be the reason? At this moment, sighs began to sound in the crowd. What's wrong with you, Shi? Speak up quickly. He's really in a hurry. Hey, who of you has seen Yu Erlang? My own wife had this incident, but she still seems like a normal person. Upon hearing everyone's discussion, Zhao Huafan frowned and realized that Tofu Shisha was not single and had already started a family. And that man, who was not present when such a thing happened, is that a bit unreasonable? Suddenly, a hint of doubt flashed in Zhao Huafan's eyes, but as he looked at the confident and fearless faces of Ximen Fu and Bao Sheng, the answer had already arrived in his heart. One side is numb, the other side is fearless, which actually indicates many things. Are you willing to admit to the previous incident of stabbing someone with a knife, Lady Yu? If you keep silent, this county will handle it in accordance with the law. Zhao Huafan had not heard of the previous review, and by the time he arrived here, the dust had almost settled. Otherwise, I'll see the road rough. As the idea flashed through his mind, he couldn't help but smile. In fact, when this idea appeared in his mind, he had already made a decision. Wait a minute. A slightly green but firm voice drank the token that was about to land in Su Hu's hand. Su Hu was taken aback at the words and then looked at the crowd. Who said that? You know the consequences of roaring court. Upon hearing Su Hu's words, the crowd voluntarily gave way to a young man, a tall and calm young man. Who are you? With Su Hu's words, Ximen Fuha and Bao Sheng in the Yamen lobby couldn't help but turn around and look over, their eyes somewhat sinister. How could they feel so happy when suddenly a Cheng Yao Jin shot out, seeing that the matter was about to settle? Since adults want to be good officials and know there are tricks involved, they still judge cases like this. Isn't it self-deception? Upon hearing these words, Bao Sheng and his wife suddenly felt a sense of unease in their hearts. It was because Su Hu was a stubborn donkey and their relationship could not move, that they dealt with Yu Shi. Yellow-mouthed children, dare you speak falsely? Mr. Su is dignified and uses you to talk nonsense. Bao Sheng spoke harshly and burst out drinking. Not to mention, Bao Sheng's demeanor was somewhat threatening. Those who didn't know why became a bit timid when he drank it. After all, officials were officials, not ordinary people who could afford to offend them. Zhaoshuyuan.com. Upon hearing these words, the young man chuckled lightly. He, above the court, even the county magistrate remained silent. You, the little litigant, are stirring up trouble. Do you think the county magistrate doesn't have you to distinguish right from wrong? Upon hearing this, Bao Sheng muttered to himself that it was not good. Although the person across from him was young, he was very difficult to deal with. If it were anyone else, perhaps they would still like to hear the words of sliding the beard and patting the horse, but Su Hu was different. He was just a stone in a pit. Bao Sheng, if you don't want your achievements anymore, this county can meet your requirements. Upon hearing Su Hu's gloomy voice, Bao Sheng couldn't help but shiver. As a county parent, he has the right to do such things. Although the steps are cumbersome, if he really gets serious, he could really be beaten to death. County Magistrate, if the case is concluded like this, you can truly have a clear conscience. If you say something just now, you can also use it as a joke. After all, I am just a passerby, and perhaps I will leave here tomorrow. The fate of my parents' officials has little to do with me. However, I would like to say that there are many onlookers watching the case today. If you insist on doing so, I don't know if these villagers will still believe in you as a father and mother official in the future. I believe that the mirror above your head is hanging high. Upon hearing this, Su Hu did not get angry. Originally, he thought there was something suspicious about this matter, so he kept reminding you to speak up. However, you seem to have eaten a weight and had a firm heart. How are you doing? Let's not mention right or wrong for now, but I have guessed the reason why you sure remained silent. Oh, then tell me and listen. Have you ever seen Yu Erlang, the husband of the Yu family?